Welcome. I am the Speare bearer, and these are stories from the hole. I am home in Port Charlotte, Florida, where I went to high school, where my parents live. I flew back here from just outside of Seattle. Well, no, I flew back from Seattle. I was about 2 days outside of Seattle, about 80 miles away, 100 miles away, away from Seattle about a week ago, and just realized after about 5.5 months on the road that I was really exhausted, and that it was actually quite, it's pretty dumb of me to have planned this 8-9 month bike tour and not have built a rest period into that. So I decided I needed one, and my 10-year high school reunion is actually in a few days, so I thought it would be a good excuse to fly home and rest and then go to my 10-year reunion. So that's why I'm here, and I'll be going to that in about 2 days. So it's about 2 days worth of activities that our senior class president, Lindsay Opella, and her constituents have planned. So I'm looking forward to that, and I just bought the ticket, and it was really expensive. But hopefully it'll be worth it. Hopefully a lot of people come, because my friends and I have a saying that we every other year, it's like 9 years till the 10, 6 years till the 10, 4 months till the 10. We've been counting down since we graduated for the 10-year high school reunion. That doesn't mean all my friends are going, but I'm definitely going. So I'm really excited about that. But I figured I would take some of this time to tell some stories from the hole. And what that means, that's another term that me and my friends came up with, because one day my friend Dan, this was like 6-7 years ago, my friend Dan, we all went to the beach, and my friend Dan had some stories to tell us about some crazy drama that had happened, and he made us all wait until we all got to the beach, and he dug a huge hole and sat in the hole, and he told us stories from that hole. Interestingly enough, after that, the hole collapsed around him, and we thought he was going to die, and it was one of the most epic things we ever did, to all have to pull him out of this collapsing sand hole on the beach before he suffocated. Anyway, so stories from the hole. I have quite a few stories that I want to tell. It's not actually, I mean, the hole also being like my hometown, Port Charlotte. I'm referring to it as a hole. Hopefully not. It's a term of endearment, and being back home. Anyway, stories from the hole. So let's see. The first story that I want to tell is about, so when I was in Seattle, it's not really so much a story, but when I was in Seattle, my friend Tommy Rachel, who passed away a little more than a year ago, who's probably the biggest inspiration for me doing this trip, when I was riding up the coast, I didn't want to go all the way up to Seattle because I was tired, and I really, for different reasons, I wanted to cut my time and get to Chicago quicker. And so I was thinking about, once I got to Portland, turning east instead of riding up to Seattle like I'd planned. And I thought it'd be easier to climb over the mountain ranges from there. It would have been easier. But my friend Tommy, his mentor, and one of his friends, Tim Degner, lived in Seattle. Tommy's mom, Grace, told me that. And once I realized that, I knew I had to go all the way up to Seattle. So up in Seattle, Tim Degner was really, really kind enough to put me up in a hostel in the International District for 3 nights, and it was cool. It was a really cool place. It was a cool experience. The whole time I'd been traveling, I never got to stay in a hostel, so it was an interesting experience. A lot of international people. I don't typically tend to have such a great time around young people who are let loose. They can tend to grate on my nerves, but these folks were all really cool, and the International District was cool, and there's a lot of great food there and stuff, and I just like being there. It was a nice, kind of good location to be in the city. And while I was there, I remember one day I was in like the eating area, and there was this lady who was talking, this older lady, this older Asian lady. I found out later that she's Vietnamese, but she was talking this other guy's ear off, and I could see her in the corner of my eye. She was talking to this guy for like maybe 2 hours or something. and I remember him leaving, and her kind of looking around like she wanted somebody else to talk to. I mean, she just wanted to talk. She had a lot to say, and just wanted to talk, but I remember thinking, man, I cannot make eye contact with this lady. And later on that day, I was in kind of a funk where I was really tired and I knew I should be going out. I was in Seattle only for a few days and I knew I should have been going out and performing, but I thought I was going to take one day to rest. But around 5 o'clock that day, and I hung out in the hostel all that day, but around 5 o'clock I was like, man, I can't. I'm here, I have to perform, which is a big problem. I can never just let myself rest because I would just feel guilty about it while I was on the road. When I'm home, it's a lot easier, but I'm on the road, it's hard. So, yeah, finally around 5 o'clock, I rode down to the Pike, which is kind of the area on the pier in the water that faces the water out in Seattle, and there's a lot of shops there and stuff, and just all kinds of action is happening there. So I rode down there, and sure enough, that short Vietnamese lady just happened to come across me. This area is huge and full of people, but sure enough, that Vietnamese lady comes across me, and she's like, "You!" And she recognized me from the hostel, and she came up and started talking to me, and she was actually really, really sweet and really, really nice, and we talked a lot about. There was another Japanese girl who rode in the same time as me into Seattle, and we we were both heading toward the same hostel. She was like 22 years old. I don't remember her name, but she was also touring. I think it was like the first or second young lady I'd seen bike touring by herself, like of all the tourists that I'd met. So anyway, the Vietnamese lady that I was talking to, her name was Me. She started talking to me about her and just started telling me about how brave she thought that girl was for traveling that way. And then I told her that I was doing the same thing. And she was like, "Oh, it's crazy." And she was just really fun to talk to and really nice and had a lot of great things to say and was really interested in what I was doing. And after we talked for quite a while, she convinced me to go over this area, this open area that's facing the water, and perform this kind of park. And I was hesitant about it, but she talked me into it, even though I was tired and not really feeling like wrangling an entire audience. But she talked me into it, and I was really glad that she did, because I went over and did the show, and she kind of helped me, and she was looking out for me, looking out for my bike, and yeah, we did a nice, good show there. And I didn't really get to film it. For whatever reason, I didn't film it, mostly because I don't like to ask people to film my shows if they've never seen me perform before. But we had a nice crowd there in Seattle, out on the Pike, and I think I got a picture or something. But and then the next day I saw Me again. What happened that next day? Well, I walked Me home, or I walked her back to the hostel, and then, man, what happened after that? I feel like we hung out again someplace, or we went for a walk or something, or maybe it was just back from the Pike. We went for a walk, and just her talking to me and just telling me about her being older and not really having any prospects, but just wanting to travel and liking America, but not knowing if she should go back to Vietnam, and how the Asian, it's easier for me to go to Vietnam or to eat in an Asian restaurant here in America, because they'll treat an American better than they would treat a Vietnamese person. They treat her like garbage because she didn't look like she was rich or had money. And I don't know if that's true, but that was her perspective. And I don't know, I'm not remembering all the details really well. I'm still pretty groggy and tired in general, but she's just such a sweet lady. And I was supposed to hang out with her on the 4th of July and take her to see fireworks, but she never called me, and I don't know, I hope she ended up doing something more fun than hanging out with me. But I don't know, that's one of the stories from the whole. I don't know if it's very interesting to anyone, but it was really interesting for me to meet her, and this young black guy traveling the country on a bicycle, hang out with this old, maybe 70, 60-year-old Vietnamese lady who's just traveling around the United States by herself, kind of away from her, estranged from her family, and just, I don't know, she was just a really cool lady, and I don't know if I'll ever see her again, but it was nice to meet her. She made Seattle a lot better for me. Alright, that's the first story.